Welcome. I am Karen Glazier, and today I have the pleasure in speaking with Mike Spunt, our president at ProArc. Mike also leads the ProArc Power team, which works with clients in the power industry. Mike, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to share with the viewers today some of your views of the trends that are happening in the industry and also some of the opportunities that power plants are facing. And as we both know, if you unpack the power industry, there's quite a few facets to that industry and audiences in that industry, such as the private equity firms, the O&Ms, the plant managers, and the list goes on. So I want to dive into the first question, and it's something that we hear a lot about when it comes to the power industry. And I know you and I have talked a lot about this as well as the team internal here, and it's the word modernization. And it's interesting because when you talk to power plants, as you well know, modernizing operations tends sometimes to be the last thing on the to-do list. And it's interesting because there's a lot of benefits when you start modernizing a plant and how that impacts the operational efficiency of that plant. So I want to ask you, what are the benefits of modernizing the plant as it pertains to operational efficiency?
Well, thanks for that question. It's a really good question. And when I get a question like that, I usually like to think about what are the focuses or goals that plants have as it relates to their operations. And you mentioned, operational efficiency, and certainly that is a key element to the effectiveness of plants. And certainly they're very interested in maintaining and where possible reducing their costs of operations. So if those are the areas that they really focus on, at the same time, IT modernization or transformation can provide those areas with accelerated benefits. So for example, moving to cloud. Moving to cloud enables these plants to gain efficiencies, increase flexibility, and reduce their cost of operations. You would think that investing in cloud would be something that would be an ongoing investment that they'd want to shy away from. But at the same time, why continue to build out infrastructure internally when you can do some of the very same things with cloud? Now, not everything can move to cloud. Certain application systems and so forth can't do that. But when you create the environment where those things get tied together, both on-prem and in the cloud, now you have a way to really focus on modernizing your plant.
That sounds like it could be very powerful too, to create that efficiency, make sure operations are running as they should be. And we both know that cyber threats, there's a constant onslaught of that, right? I mean, it's just a constant, we've seen some of that with recent, the pipeline and just a variety of other cyber attacks that have happened that can cause a very negative impact on a plant, which obviously has a very negative ripple effect out from that. So staying on top of that, I can only imagine, is a critical component, considering the fact that the whole purpose of the plant or the goal of the plant is to be running at 100%, optimized efficiency all the time, and they always have to have uptime, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And I would even go a step further and say, because they want to be up 100% or whatever their goals are of the time, cybersecurity is a really important element to any modernized plan. It used to be that the control systems side of plants, the OT side, for example, were sort of air gapped from the rest of all communications. That's no longer the case. And so as a result, it's really important to apply many of the same tactics on the IT side that are being used to the OT side of the plant, simply because the communication pathways, they need to be secured. The OT environment and network needs to be secured. there are third parties coming into the OT network, and you wouldn't think that that would necessarily be the case in certain critical infrastructure, but in fact, it really is. And so operationally, you really need to apply all the same kinds of strategies, tactics, and tools to the OT side of the network as you do on the IT side of the network. So when you look at cybersecurity, certainly you have NERC compliance, that's important, but best practices around cybersecurity, going beyond just the minimum requirements of NERC compliance, are really critical to ensuring that operational efficiencies not only are maintained, but enable the plant to operate during challenges of the kinds of things that we see in the world today relative to nation states, relative to other hacking attempts. And so investment in cybersecurity is really an important component of any modernization plan.
So how are plants leveraging advancements in data and AI right now to do those sort of things?
Well, the interesting thing is many of them are not yet in terms of artificial intelligence. Certainly there are applications, for example, historians that can provide aggregated data and some visualizations, but most of these tools don't provide any sort of advanced analytics. And so as a result, one of the things that ProArc can do and does for some of our clients is to provide more meaningful insights through analytics that enable plants to make better decisions so that private equity, O&Ms, and plant managers all can take advantage of that. But even going beyond that, when you think about things like artificial intelligence, certainly one of the foundational areas in which you can take advantage of that kind of technology is around predictive maintenance. And so when you look at a plant, many of the costs revolve around the costs of maintaining the operational components of the plant, primarily on the control side of the operation, not surprisingly. So if we can provide insights into when is optimally the time and the types of maintenances that need to be performed at those times, if we can provide that intelligence to the plant, then we are really helping them to manage their costs effectively. So that's really just one thing. But more importantly, in some ways, is what does the future look like, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're a private equity firm, investments in things like renewables, investments in fossil plants, how do we take advantage of changes in climate in terms of making those investment decisions? Those are all areas in which we can help private equity, and as a result, the folks that work for them, the operations and maintenance companies, how do we help them to prepare for and invest in the future?
Mm-hmm. And that is, we know that there's a lot of unpredictable potential things that can happen in the future too, and having a better view of what that future is can just help plants prepare best for pretty much anything that could come down the road. So, when you bring up the future, I always like to ask folks like yourself who live and breathe industries like the power industry, if you had a crystal ball right now, what does the future look like for the power plants, 3, 5, 10 years from now even? Like what's down the path for them coming up here?
So I'll give you 3 words: cyber, cyber, cyber.
I thought you might say that, Mike.
It's not getting any better out there. I will say that even the smaller plants are going to be targets for folks who are interested in a variety of different goals, whether it's just interrupting the critical infrastructure, taking advantage of ransomware, you name it. It really doesn't matter. Anything in the power industry is going to be a target for some malicious attack. And so, and NERC is doing, its best to help players in the industry maintain their level of security by ensuring certain levels of compliance. And certainly, as you go up the NERC compliance stack from low to medium to high, you see a lot of that. But even those that are in low impact plants, or even plants that maybe, for example, in the hydro industry or solar, don't even rise to the level of low impact, there are some really important cybersecurity steps to take. In addition to that, so for the future, I think the biggest is going to be around cybersecurity. One other thing I would say is, this balance or growing imbalance, we might even say, between demand and our ability to meet that demand through renewable energy. Demand for energy is really growing at a rapid pace. We're seeing that now particularly with electric automobiles and other kinds of demand creators. And the question really is, there's a goal for renewable energy in many areas to meet certain energy neutral or carbon neutral levels, if you like, by a certain date. And we're finding that we're needing to push out those dates further and further because of the demand is increasing, and therefore fossil plants aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Now, the question is, again, going back to the question that you asked around AI and analytics, when is the time right to make certain kinds of investments in fossil plants versus renewable plants, and investing in new plants, for example, building new plants. So, I think all of those things sort of tie together, and in the future, that data is going to become more and more critical.
Couldn't agree more. And modernization will become more and more critical because they're going to have to be changing not just how they operate, but the kind of energy and output that they're creating. And so having the ability to quickly adjust to those requirements, like you said, from a demand perspective, is going to be crucial. One thing I have learned since being with ProArc is that the whole industry is quite the web of complexity. And it's interesting, we joke sometimes about how you flick a switch and you just think that's it. That's the power industry. Flick a switch, your lights go on, you're all good. But there is so much integral happenings every day to make that happen. And I think people, don't really always understand what's behind flicking the switch. And today, Mike, you really gave us a good look into what makes that up, but also how that functions and what's important when it comes to those that are in the power industry as it pertains to modernization and leveraging certain emerging technologies and that sort of thing. And it is also interesting because IT sits in the middle of all of it when you really sit down and think about it. And it's pretty impressive when you think about all the different things that power plants could be leveraging today and how they should be looking at not just their data, but the insight from their data, and how they should be preparing for things like cyber threats, which are not going away. It's only going to get stronger and more damaging down the road, and they have to be prepared for that. So I really found our conversation today to be very interesting, and I learned even more about your world and the power industry, and hopefully our viewers have too. So thank you, Mike, so much for taking the time with me today and everybody watching, and I really look forward to chatting more in the future with you about the power industry.
Well, thanks very much for having me, Karen. I really appreciate it, and hopefully our viewers find this information worthwhile. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike. You take care.
You too. Bye-bye.